It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Eleanor Morgan opened the drawer that had remained untouched for more than a decade. Dust had settled like a blanket over its wooden surface, a still and forgotten corner of a life once bustling. The cottage she lived in now was far quieter than it had ever been, nested at the edge of a sleepy Oregon town where the Pacific mist kissed the hills every morning. Eleanor, now 71, lived alone among her books, her faded family photographs, and a garden that had seen better summers. 12 years had passed since Harold, her husband of 43 years, had died. His illness had crept in like a thief, silent and cunning, robbing him first of strength, then of presence and finally of breath. Eleanor had survived that loss by retreating. She no longer traveled, rarely ventured beyond the local library, and had stopped speaking to many of the people who once filled her days. Time hadn't healed the wound. It had simply taught her how to live around it. But that drawer, that was the drawer Harold had insisted she never open until someday. She had honored that vague request, mostly out of reverence, partly out of fear. What could possibly rest inside that he had chosen not to share in life? But that Tuesday morning something shifted. The silence of the house felt heavier than usual, as if it too waited. With trembling fingers, Eleanor pulled the drawer open. Inside lay a single envelope. Her name, Eleanor, was written in Harold's familiar looping script. No date, no return address, just her name. She held the envelope against her chest for a long while before she dared to open it. "Eleanor, my darling," it began. She could hear his voice as she read. It wasn't her imagination. It was memory, vivid and cruel in its detail. His voice was still alive inside her, trapped in time like a butterfly in amber. "If you're reading this, then I am already gone. And if I know you, my dear, you're sitting in the quiet, your tea gone cold, wondering why I left this for you." The letter was not long, but it unraveled everything Eleanor thought she knew about Harold and their life together. In it, he confessed to a deep regret that had haunted him since their early years, a letter he had once written to his first love but never sent. He had kept that letter, not out of longing, but as a reminder of what he almost lost when he chose Eleanor instead. The drawer contained that old letter too, folded neatly beneath his words to her. "I chose you, Eleanor," Harold had written. "Not once. Not by accident. I chose you every single day. But I needed you to know the truth. Because love that is real must make room for honesty." Even now, tears fell freely as Eleanor finished reading. It wasn't the mention of another woman that struck her. It was the realization that Harold had carried that weight so silently, never burdening her with it, and yet trusting her with it now. For hours she sat with those letters, reading them again and again. Then something surprising happened. Eleanor laughed. It was soft, and it cracked through the stillness like sunlight through blinds. Because for the first time in 12 years, she realized that Harold was still here, not in some ethereal spiritual sense, but through these words, this truth, this vulnerability he had left behind. That night, Eleanor walked into her garden barefoot. The soil was cool and damp. She looked up at the stars and whispered a thank you into the night. Over the next weeks, something stirred in her. Eleanor started writing again, something she hadn't done since her college days. Short letters to herself, then journal entries, then eventually a memoir. She returned to the community center and joined a local writers group. Every Tuesday, she'd read aloud from her work, surprising herself and others with the richness of her words and the warmth behind her quiet demeanor. One afternoon, a younger woman in the group asked, "How do you write with so much emotion?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Because I've lived through silence," she said. "And silence, when broken, has so much to say." It had taken 12 years for her to open that drawer, and only a few months to reopen her soul. What Harold had left her wasn't just a letter. It was permission. Permission to grieve, to question, to forgive. But most of all to begin again. She started painting again too, using the little sunroom Harold had built years ago, the one she had turned into a storage space. Now it was filled with canvases and color, alive with expression. She painted Harold's hands from memory, their garden in the summer light, the hills of Oregon in all their moods. Eventually, Eleanor compiled her writings and paintings into a small self-published book titled after the drawer. She printed only 30 copies. She gave them to friends, neighbors, and placed a few in the local library. But one copy she kept on her nightstand, right next to a framed photograph of Harold, the one where he wore his wool sweater and that crooked grin. At 71, Eleanor Morgan no longer lived in the shadows of what had been lost. She lived in the quiet joy of what had been remembered, reclaimed, and reborn.